The self-led teams versus the top-down leadership. We've got an industry full of people in construction that are trying to build and breed efficiency. We're historically inefficient in construction. I mean, we are awful in construction, but we know it and we're trying to realize it and do something about it. And leadership's a huge part of that. So self-led teams versus a top-down approach.
Yeah. It's I'm chuckling because there's so many angles of this, of how it can be executed for success. Not perfection, but success, right? And every company is a little different. Every company has their own protocols, their own standard operating procedures, their own policies. And so it's challenging sometimes to say, hey, how can we all do this? Well, you got to allow it. First and foremost, you have to allow it. So take everything, all of those other things, and put them aside for a moment. If you're not going to allow it, then obviously it's never gonna freaking work. Period. Like full stop. You can show me all of your, financial protocol. I have a list literally where like I talk with, organizations and I'm like, hey, you can talk to me, CHRO or COO or CEO or whoever, and you can tell me about your risk assessment policy or your financial controls policy or your code of ethics or your audit committee charter or your documentation for retention policy, like all this stuff. If you don't allow self-led teams to live in your organization, it's never going to happen. So you can talk about it all you want, but it's just going to backfire on you because you're not actually backing it up with what your authority, wherever your authority lies, you're not backing it up by allowing it to happen. So that's first and foremost. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying you wake up tomorrow, CEO, whoever, and you go, okay, self-led teams, it's everything's good. You got to work into it, right? Is the person qualified to lead? Is the person sufficient to lead? Do you trust them to lead? Most importantly, like at the end of the day, do you trust them to lead? Well, if your answer is very simply, I don't trust them to lead, okay, what is it going to take for you to trust them to lead? And if you can't answer that, you, my friend, are the problem, right? Like you, my friend, are the problem. If you can't articulate well enough what it's going to take to allow trust for someone else to lead, that's why we come alongside. That's why my consultant firm will come alongside and go like, hey, if you don't know what that means, if you can't break that down, that's fine. We'll work alongside of you to break that down and actually build it in to a pipeline. We'll build it in so you get to a point of where you have trust with that individual. Or you either get to a place of trust, or you get to a place of deselection, or you get to a place of a lateral shift, right? Maybe that person's never going to, for example, right? You don't want me as a CFO. That's a perfect example. You do not want Kyle Buckett as your CFO. And I don't want to be your CFO. So if you're trying to say, hey, Kyle, here's all the steps for you to be a CFO for me and my company, guess what? I'm never going to earn that trust. I'm not. I'm just not, because I'm not interested in it at all. Nothing against CFOs. I love my CFOs. I love my general counsels. I'm never going to be the general counsel either. Why? Because I don't desire it. So if you're someone trying to put somebody into a role that they're not even interested in, well, no joke, no shit. They're not obviously not going to earn that trust because they don't even want to get to that position. So maybe it's a lateral move. Okay, Kyle, well, I just want you to lead. Great. You could put me in the COO role. I would thrive there. And then you could say, okay, Kyle, now I want to trust you even further and I want to step up to the board position. Okay, then you build out trust. Hey, Eddie, I want you to build out trust. And now you go, okay, from COO, now you become CEO and boom, you elevate. And there's a path, right? But it's all about, can that person eventually achieve the trust? And can you articulate what it's going to take to achieve that trust? And that could be at every level. I'm just talking C-suite. It can be at the manager level. It can be at the assistant manager level. It can be at the site manager. It can be at a development team, and on and on and on. And some people are very content by not promoting. Some people are very content, and there's nothing freaking wrong with that. I know plenty. I mean, we run surveys after surveys after surveys, understanding if people are content and motivated. And I'll tell you what, we look at these all the time. The number one motivator for employee base across America, over 400,000 people on some of these surveys have been surveyed time and time again. The number one motivator to motivate people, everyone thinks it's money. It's not money. And it's not upward movement. Those are like numbers 6 and 8. Number one is just, hey, I love my job. I just wish I got a little more appreciation. I just wish I got a little more recognition. It's really interesting when you start looking at some of the statistics and data out there.
The recognition aspect of it almost comes from taking bold steps, right? Like in some cases, right? And I've seen this in big companies primarily, where you get that middle management layer, which is just like, I am just going to do the thing that is safest. I'm not going to take any bold steps, but that is actually affecting their ability to get any sort of recognition too. And so I guess the question is like, who is the biggest offender when it comes to giving trust to people in an organization? Like, is it these big companies that tend to struggle with this more, or is it the smaller mom and pop shops that struggle with giving trust? I guess I'm just trying to paint a picture for the people that listen of like, hey, if you're in this type of organization, you might want to look out for this because you're a little more susceptible than this other type.
Yeah, I would say it's the unsuccessful ones. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. It's the ones that are having multiple failures and just keep failing and failing and failing again. I mean, 95% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. Why? Because they didn't trust people. They didn't build a framework for how they can elevate their team members. So if you're that founder of a company and you're doing everything and you never delegate, dude, you can't do everything. I just talked about how I can't be the CFO and the GC. Like I don't want it. So I mean, if you're not delegating the legal eventually to someone, if you're not delegating sales eventually to someone, if you're not delegating operations to somebody, customer success, customer service, I mean, and on and on and on, you're going to get swamped. You can't keep up. If you're, I was mentoring a young cat here in Austin. I love him to death. He's such a hard worker. But when we first started, he's a GC. He's got a little construction firm, and mainly he focuses on like ADUs and some smaller remodels. Think 75,000 US to like 300,000. Like that's his construction size of contract. And so when we first started working together, and I was like, wait, bro, you're doing every single estimate by hand? And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And trust me, I get it. When you got to start out somewhere, trust me, I understand. But I was like, hey, bro, we've got to get you to a point where you can ramp up the inbound so that you can afford to hire someone else to help you with these estimations, because you're going on site 4 or 5 times a day. You're not even who's going over to the actual 4 or 5 contracts that are underway. He's like, man, I'm so swamped. I'm like, buddy. So you guys, that's a great example, I believe. Tell me I'm wrong, but that's a great example of how it can, impact y'all's industry. Is, you're just getting worked. Well, we got to slow down and go, all right, where can I ease up some cash flow so that I can start elevating and bringing people into this to take over some of the load? And the ones who fail to do that, The ones who fail to go, hey, how do I bring in as soon as possible some additional capital resources so that I can allocate it to growing the team? Those are the ones that achieve mission success.